Welcome to the class overview series where we're going to be going to discussing the different classes in Fire Emblem Three Houses.
Hey guys, J Cross X. As we're going to be doing this collab series, we're going to be going over the general information about each class, like the certification requirements, stats, abilities, and overall strengths and limitations to determine their viability. What units are good fit for each class.
These videos will be gameplay focused, so there really shouldn't be any major spoilers, but I advise you anyways to watch your own discretion, and if you haven't played Three Houses yet, you absolutely should.
Please play this game, it is so good.
Yeah.
Anyways, guys, so for this episode, we're going to be talking about High Lord, along with its upgraded version, Great Lord. Important to note that we'll probably only be doing two classes for the first three videos. We're going to be talking about Edelgard and Claude's classes next, so... For this class, it is exclusive to Dimitri, and by extent the Blue Lions route that you have to choose in Chapter 1, and Dimitri is the only one who can get into this class. Rather than requiring any specific skill levels or any seals for certification, Dimitri will automatically be certified and reclassed into High Lord after the Chapter 12 mission. You will also be forced to deploy him as a High Lord for the Chapter 13 mission. This can immediately be considered a major strength of this class, as it literally has zero investment needed for it.
So High Lord is a 5-move infantry class, which puts it in line with some other classes like Sniper and Swordmaster in terms of movement. It has two class abilities, Lance Fair, which increases lance damage by 5, and Charm, which increases the damage of adjacent allies by 3. Upon mastering High Lord, you get the ability Pop and Circumstance, which simply grants +4 luck and +4 charm. I would definitely not say this ability is worth mastering the class just to unlock it, and if you do end up mastering the class, I would still probably not use this ability. Extra stats are always good, but +4 luck is rarely impactful, and Dimitri's Charm is usually good enough on its own to consistently hit and avoid gambits, so it's probably not worth a slot in most builds.
Yeah, on top of that, High Lord's base stats are kind of unremarkable, and it's not very likely you'll get any stat increases upon going into High Lord, unlike other classes that have much higher stat minimums. So unless you get really unlucky with level ups, then yeah, you'll probably just not get any stat ups when you go into the class automatically, especially halfway through the game. While in this class, Dimitri gets a +3 modifier to HP and speed, and a +2 to charm, and a +1 to strength and defense. Modifiers are pretty average, and the strength is actually a point lower than most other physical advanced tier classes, which at this point in the game you will probably have unlocked. As for skills, Dimitri gets a +3 growth modifier to swords, lances, and authority as a High Lord. The lance growth is useful, though fairly standard, because you'll be classing him into lance classes regardless, and the sword growth is not really that useful on him unless you want wind sweep for whatever reason. As for the authority growth, that is relatively unique, and it's a good aspect of the class, I'd say. And it is a good area to grow for Dimitri, definitely. Get up to A authority on Dimitri, that is important, to obtain the broken Battalion Wrath Battalion Vantage combo. So this is a lot less useful, I'd say, in the late game, because you want to get this as soon as possible. But if you don't have it by then definitely pick that up as soon as possible with the +3 authority.
So the last thing to mention statistically is the growth rates. As a High Lord, Dimitri receives an additive 20% increase to his HP growth rate, 5% to strength, dexterity, and defense, and then 10% to charm. These are actually a bit below average compared to advanced classes, but the charm growth is among the highest, so that's something to consider. Overall, High Lord stats aren't bad enough to be a major weakness of the class, but they're also not good enough to make it stand out in any way compared to any alternatives. Combined with the fact that class abilities are average at best, and you have a class that is really missing just one special thing about it to make it worth using, aside from the really cool animations.
So, now moving on, after the Chapter 15 mission, the High Lord class automatically gets upgraded into the Great Lord, which comes with, honestly, not that many changes. The base stats and stat boost increase across the board a little bit, and they're generally unimpactful unless you haven't been training Dimitri, or again, have gotten very unlucky with his level ups like we mentioned before with the High Lord class. The stat boost while in Great Lord can be pretty solid upgrade, notably the extra strength, though, again, they're not really in line with the master classes, which many of your units probably have at this point in the game. As I said, same with the advanced classes for High Lord. HP modifier increases to 30%, and the strength and dex modifiers increase to 10%. And while these are welcome changes to the class, the growth rates are still just pretty much in line with the competitors at that point, like Paladin. The biggest change here, statistically, is definitely the increase from 5 move to 6 move, which obviously isn't on the level of competitors like Paladin, but is a decent amount of a movement for an infantry class, and makes a big difference with Dimitri's ability to keep up with other units and draw aggro on the front lines.
So the class abilities unfortunately remain the same, still having only Lance-Fair and Charm. Rather than receiving an ability upon mastery like High Lord does, Mastering Great Lord grants access to the unique combat art Parasoline, which can only be used while in Great Lord. It's a Lance combat art that costs only 3 durability and grants plus 10 might and plus 10 avoid, which notably can stack with his personal abilities increase to avoid. It also moves Dimitri 1 space backwards after it's used, similar to Fading Blow. This is a decent tool for his player phase, but I wouldn't say that's a big selling point for using this class. At the point of the game that it's unlocked, it's not really any more powerful than other options in player phase like Brave Lances, fishing for crits with Killer Lances, set up for dual phasing, or even just nuking enemies with Atrocity. So you really don't need to be in a rush to master Great Lord, it won't make a big difference. And unlike High Lord, you don't even gain anything transferable to other classes by doing so.
So overall, to summarize the strengths of these two classes, they have the most important thing for Dimitri, which is Lance-Fair. You're always going to be wanting to class into abilities with Dimitri that have Lance-Fair. This is even more impactful on him than most other Lance build users, since he obviously gets the Battalion Vantage build that I mentioned earlier, allowing him to guarantee crit, which means that Lance-Fair essentially provides an increase of 15 damage rather than 5. While Paladin is also an option for Lance-Fair, Paladin requires a decent amount of investment, mostly to unlock Dimitri's budding talent in riding, and raise it all the way up to B or a little lower if you're willing to gamble for the certification instead. Meanwhile, you could literally not instruct a Dimitri a single time, and he would get access to 2 decent Lance-Fair classes as soon as Chapter 13 starts.
However, these classes definitely do have their flaws. As infantry classes, their movement is mediocre, which doesn't pair well with Dimitri's aggressive enemy-phasing playstyle. They only have 2 class abilities, and Charm isn't a particularly impactful one at the point of the game when it's unlocked. Especially for Dimitri, he's usually sent out far ahead or away from other units to draw aggro, rather than being positioned adjacent to everyone else. Not to mention, it's hard to maintain adjacency when the class has such limited movement compared to others. You're going to have a lot of flyers at this point, or even just cavalry units. It would have been nice to give this class an extra ability like Lance Crit plus 10, similar to Swordmaster's Sword Crit plus 10, or even something like Terrain Resistance, since the grounded class, like how Violet's Enlightened one gets that. But at least once it gets upgraded to Great Lord, that would have been nice, if not immediately.
Yeah, and to circle back on the benefits of this class, the whole zero investment thing is reduced significantly, because as I've mentioned multiple times, you get this class pretty late into the game. Most units will be reaching the advanced classes at least a couple of chapters before High Lord even becomes available at all, and possibly even earlier for Dimitri because of his personal abilities, personal ability like all the other class leaders have, which is just a free XP boost. So to reap the full benefits of having a zero investment class later on, it essentially requires him to be stagnant during these few chapters where all the other units will have a power spike. I think it makes far more sense to invest heavily into Dimitri during the first half of the game to reach A, authority, as well as the Paladin certification requirements. Having a lower investment option would be more appreciated at the Master class level, since Dimitri becomes unavailable in lectures for a large portion of the second half of the game, and unfortunately High Lord and Great Lord just can't compete with most of the Master classes. It makes a lot more sense to invest heavily into Dimitri instead of just allowing him get a free class later, since he will most certainly be your best unit in a Blue Lions playthrough.
Overall, I would give the High Lord and Great Lord classes a combined rating of about 5 out of 10. They don't stand out at all, and they certainly have some drawbacks, but they're perfectly serviceable, and they won't really hold back Dimitri's performance all that much from allowing him to basically solo maps. This class often gets a bad rap because the forced class change in Chapter 13 makes the mission more difficult than if he was able to stay in Paladin, but honestly the class change is a much less significant issue compared to the fact they swap out his battalion with a new one that has an insane amount of endurance, which essentially disables your battalion Wrath Vantage combo for the entire map. I would recommend these classes in 2 cases. One, if you don't meet the skill requirements to gamble for Paladin, in which case these classes can at least be used temporarily to bridge the gap. Or if you haven't yet reached A rank authority, which makes a +3 growth modifier to authority in battle really useful, and if you don't, you definitely should stay in these classes until you reach it, because that's the #1 priority for Dimitri. If you do plan on keeping Dimitri in these classes, this makes him a good candidate for movement boosting items like the Shoes of the Wind and the March Ring. The Fetters of Dromi can also be good, though I don't think Dimitri needs Kanto nearly as much as he needs good movement, since he's primarily an enemy phase unit.
Alright, so before we end off this video, I'm just going to make a quick tier list placement for Great Lord and High Lord. We're going to be doing this throughout the series, and we're going to be having each class on this tier list eventually, and it will be complete. So to start off this list, we are going to be moving Dimitri's Great Lord and High Lord right there into the C tier. Again, they have the essentials to make Dimitri work, however, there's just better options that you can get much earlier. So, with that all being said, there's nothing more to say about High Lord and Great Lord. That's their strengths, weaknesses, and honestly, it's kind of just a subpar class.
If you like the video or if you have any thoughts of your own, please leave a comment.
And also, guys, make sure to check the description. If you're not already subscribed to both our channels, please do. We'll be uploading more of these videos on each of our channels, so feel free to check them out in the future.
Yep. And stay tuned for the next episode of the series, which will be about the Armored Lord and Emperor classes.